In this part of the video, we will be discussing Aristotle's views on constitution. Very interestingly, Aristotle, on the contrary to his master Plato, was interested in empirical form of inquiry or a speculative form of inquiry. Plato relied upon deductive method, but Aristotle was very keen to rely upon the observations, upon the experiments, and whatever he has sensed from his sense organs. In this pursuance, Aristotle compared and analyzed 158 constitutions at that point of time, and thereby he also differentiated different types of constitution from the point of view of rule. He was of the view that constitutions were primarily responsible for the lawlessness in the state, and every ruler must observe the constitutional provisions for the purpose of ruling. So, constitutions promoted general well-being of the governed, which was based upon goodness or the common good of the society. Now, here, what Aristotle says is that there are different forms of government, what we have discussed in the earlier lecture: rule of one or rule of few or rule of many. So, we know that in rule of one there are two forms of government, good and bad, monarchy and tyranny. Similarly, rule of few, oligarchy and aristocracy, that is bad and good form, that is. And second and the last one is rule of many, which portrays the manner in which the government of democracy and polity was there. So, we have also understood that in a monarchy, which was the true form of government in the eyes of Aristotle, it was the one of the best form of the government, because the person who was having perfect virtue and the person who was having wisdom was entitled to rule. Good form and bad forms of government were differentiated on the basis of two criteria. First, the good form of government is that form of government which considers common good as one of the motives, and bad of form of the government, it considers only the good of the ruling community, that is it doesn't work in the interest of the common man or the masses. So that's why it is called a perverted form of government or a bad form of government. So monarchy, aristocracy and polity are the examples of good form of government, and tyranny, oligarchy and democracy are the bad form of perverted forms of government. So, there was difference between democracy and polity. There was difference between aristocracy and oligarchy. There was difference between polity and democracy. So, we will discuss it one by one, but in short. First is, we have already discussed what we have said, monarchy. So, it is possible for a very virtuous person to rule. However, he pointed out that monarchy was best secured when a system of rules were framed by a legislature who would also be the founder of the city. Now, that means the monarch has to be very much wise and virtuous though he was very much skeptical, very much doubtful whether he can find such a virtuous person who could be such a monarch. Nevertheless, he distinguishes five types of monarchy, right from moderate one to the worst one. So there are five types of monarchy uh, which are different in nature and different in shape. Second was uh, 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 aristocracy. Actually, the monarchy might have developed or might develop into an aristocracy, which was a true form of rule by the few. So you can see that there is a change in the process of government from rule of one to rule of few. And these there can be three types of aristocracy which were based upon mixed constitutions, employing other principles besides virtue. So there could be one kind where virtue is mixed with wealth and number. That is what you can see in oligarchy claim. That is wealth becoming the prime consideration. Second can be like virtue with democratic principles of freedom. That is freedom to one and all to have a part in ruling process. And the third one combined wealth with freedom, which was more oligarchy. So wealth with freedom means those who are rich, they get a chance to have the government. And the third form of true government was polity, that is a kind of mixed rule in which the claims of many and the property were in vogue, that is they were held in check by law. So we can say that polity, monarchy, aristocracy and polity had three different forms of types of government in the Aristotelian era, which he considered to be the good form of government. As far as perverted forms of governments are concerned, tyranny indicates the arbitrary use of power by an individual for his own personal gains, for his own advantage. And these tyrannical powers actually it degenerated into oligarchy when many more persons also wanted to have share in the power, especially those who were the rich persons. So on the basis of their wealth, which was also a criteria for oligarchy, tyranny degenerated into oligarchy. And oligarchy also, what Aristotle described, were four types. Again, the first was moderate one, very close to polity, where rulers ruled in accordance with the law. Second was there were rich and few who enjoyed few benefits. That is, the benefits expanded to some more people in oligarchic claims. And third was more restrictive and more narrow, with hereditary governing elite. That is, the person who is ruling, his son will also rule, or his descendants will rule. So again, the narrowing the limit of ruling class as far as hereditary elites are concerned. And the fourth was a small rich coterie. It was the worst form of oligarchy. Very rich small people, very rich small group of people who ruled not for the sake of laws but ruled without laws, only for the benefit of themselves. And the third and the least bad or the perverted forms of government was democracy, where rule by the poor was in practice, and those who were in majority got an opportunity to rule. Now, very interestingly, why Aristotle, who was in search of an ideal state, also allowed everyone in the democracy to have a stake in the ruling process? Interestingly, we can see that Though Aristotle regarded wisdom and virtue as the chief tenets or assets for ruling the state, so that the state could be an ideal state where common good could be perceived and it can be pursued, the policies of common good. But still, why he went for democracy instead of polity was due to the fact that he wanted a stability in the polity, and he understood that unless and until the political regimes are stable, it will not be able to deliver the good to the society or to benefit the society, because there might be a change. There might be a change in the ruling process, in the government, or in the forms of constitution, which is dangerous. So Aristotle never regarded change should be brought in an abrupt manner. So change can be there, but it should be gradual. So here he differed from his master Plato, who was of the view that any change will decay the state. But Aristotle believed that change is inevitable, but the change has to be brought in gradually rather than all of a sudden. So all of a sudden, if the change is brought, it might lead to revolutions, which we will discuss in the next video. In this particular part, we will discuss what is difference between democracy and polity, democracy between monarchy and difference between monarchy and tyranny, and difference between aristocracy and oligarchy. Now there was difference between democracy and polity between the rule by the best and rule by the richest. Difference between monarchy and tyranny was an ethical one. Monarchy was better than aristocracy, and which in turn was better than a polity. Similarly, tyranny was worse than an oligarchy, which in turn was worse than a democracy. So you can see that Aristotle thereby provided qualified support to democracy. In fact, when he differentiates between democracy and polity, he again differentiates between four types of democracy, and starting from moderate one to an extreme one. The moderate democracy had some sort of property qualifications for officials, that is, those who are rich, those who are having property, those who are having leisure time, must be able to rule and must be given the chance to rule. Second type was that everyone had the right to hold office as long as they were freeborn, that is, they were not disqualified by birth. So in the first, there was property consideration, wealth. Second, there was, that is, criteria of birth. And the third was that it included all the free men. Third type of democracy included all the free men, including aliens, that is, those who were outsiders, those who were foreigners, and the children of emancipated slaves, that is, those slaves who earlier used to be slaves but now they have been emancipated, they have been freed, so their children also had a right to participate in the ruling process. So there were also a stakeholder as far as right to vote was concerned, as far as getting a share in the governance was concerned. And the extreme democracy, the worst form of democracy, what he mentions, that here to participate in the government, all the restraints were removed and it was totally lawlessness, without any law, with full chance and full rights to demagogues, that is, those who were not good persons, but they also got the chance to rule. Now, very interestingly, we can understand, we can see that Plato had classified the governments on the basis of their law abidingness, that is, the government must be abiding by the law, whereas Aristotle regarded the criteria of general welfare and the number who wielded political power. So Aristotle was very much concerned with not only general welfare, but also he was concerned that those who are large in number must also get a share in the governance, because there are two distinct claims to power as far as Aristotle is concerned. One is right to property, that is, someone who is wealthy, he has the right to have a stake in the ruling process. And the second one is the welfare of the greatest number of human beings, that is, those who are capable of doing good to the society, they must also get a claim to govern. Now, he was very much abiding by Plato's formula that wisdom and virtue has an absolute claim to power, but still he want to make the regimes, the polity, the government very much stable and very much operative. And for that stability, he needed practical aspects. He needed operativeness in practical aspect. So Aristotle also granted a moral claim, granted an absolute moral claim to power to those who possessed wealth as well as those who were large in numbers. So, wealth and numbers also mattered much for Plato, because property guaranteed good birth, sound education, reasonable association, and leisure time period. So, property consideration was very important consideration from the point of view of Aristotle, but at the same time, he was very much confirmed. He was very much convinced that those who are large in size or number, those who claim to power on the basis of their numbers, they should be given a chance, because law was relative to the constitution. A good state will have good laws and the bad state will have bad laws. So here we can understand that how Aristotle made it very clear that there should be different types of governance on the basis of merit. Now, he was of the view that the ruling class must be enlarged enough where there are both rich and poor, and especially the middle class. He was of the view that middle class was very much interesting, very much important to be there in the ruling category, because rich and both the poor had certain limitations. Rich enjoyed great benefits and privileges, but were unwilling to accept discipline. Whereas on the other hand, the poor class was, because of their deprivation, they lacked spirit and enthusiasm. Therefore, the middle class was a countervailing force, neutralizing the centrifugal tendencies generated by contending forces, that is, the forces of rich and the poor. So, middle class was a key to provide stability to the state. And he was of the view that a stable society had to balance forces of equality and quantity. So, quality and quantity. So, quality and quantity means the quality referred to exclusive category of birth, wealth, property, social position, education, whereas quantity refer to numbers. So, in order to fulfill these criteria for having a stable government, Aristotle saw that middle class was sufficient to fulfill two important political ideas, that is equality and consensus. And because the middle class are very civil in nature, so they will not rise up for revolt, and therefore they might provide a stability. So therefore Aristotle prefers a mixed state as compared to a pure state, because pure state only wisdom and virtue is the consideration, not the number, but mixed state will be more enduring, more lasting, because of the stability which it provides. So in polity and democracy, polity takes into account freedom, wealth, culture, noble birth, and numerical superiority, whereas in the democratic considerations, all the people, I have already discussed four types of democracies, they also find a claim, they also pose a claim in the ruling of the state. Thank you.